welcome to The Wealth Whisperer, where today I'll be sharing with you the last in this little mini series of financial calculations that I've been helping you to work through. Because let's face it, we're not taught this stuff, are we? So it's really important to understand the numbers and to understand the maths around how your money's working for you, quite frankly. So today's little episode is going to be about a little spoken about topic. As opposed to return on investment, I'm going to be talking about return on equity. Right, let's dive in and I'll explain as I go along. Now, there is a way of describing this in terms of a company structure, but because most of us don't run a business or a company necessarily, we're going to focus on assets that we own personally and which have a level of equity in, i.e. a certain amount of money or value that's in there, not the debt that's against it, but the actual money aspect of what's in there, and any return that's coming from that level of value or equity in that asset. So just very, very briefly then, to touch on return on investment, this measures the profitability of a specific investment that you get yourself into at the time that you get yourself into it, okay? Whereas return on equity assesses how effectively that asset is working for you and generating a profit or a yield from it over the course of time. And this will change because the level of equity amount and the level of return will change as the investment goes on. Okay, so if you have any cash flowing assets like property, for example, where you have an asset with a level of equity in it, perhaps a mortgage against it, or not necessarily, and you're earning money from that property, then this is where you can apply the principle of return on equity. Okay, so even if you don't have a cash flowing asset, you can assess the level of equity that you have elsewhere. Either in a savings account, for example, or other investment vehicle where you get some sort of return. So in a bank account, obviously it would be the interest that you're paid, or it could be another like an ISA or a pension or any other type of investment that you hold to see how well they're working for you. So let's go for it. Now, talking about your own home, because if you do own your own home, you will have a level of equity in it. But the funny thing is, and a lot of people think that their own home is an asset, which is true to a certain degree because that equity in that property will hopefully go up over the course of time. But we have discussed about the rate of inflation and house price inflation in other episodes and how it's a little bit of a warped kind of perspective. But the funny thing about your own home, obviously, is that you do not usually derive an income from it. It usually costs you money to live there. Unless you have a lodger or you've got like a little Airbnb business where you rent out a room or, a garage on the side that's been converted, for example, that sort of scenario. So most people don't have any sort of level of return on that equity in their own home. So usually it's a big fat zero when it comes to a return on equity from your own home equity. Savings, again, is usually quite low. You may get somewhere between 3 and 5% return on any equity that you hold in a bank account. And maybe if you hold stocks and shares with dividends coming off them, then if they're focusing on yield, for example, and you actually get a return from your stocks and shares, then hopefully that might be a little bit better than what you would receive in a bank account, but not necessarily. So you really have to understand what you've got locked away where, what sort of money or equity you have locked away, and how well it's performing for you. Now, I totally understand that everyone listening to this is going to be at a totally different level, working with different levels of equity to their name. But this is just a curious discussion around how hard that equity is working for you. Okay, so My husband and I have been discussing this lately in the context of our property portfolio because we've made some decent gains over the years, and our equity in our portfolio has increased quite substantially. And sometimes, we're looking at the properties now and looking at our overall portfolio. Sometimes we kind of come across a property which is, quite frankly, underperforming because it's quite a low level of leverage, meaning we've got quite low levels of mortgage against the value of the property. The cash flow is doing well, but it's not going up at the same rate as the level of cash flow against the equity that we had in the beginning. So let's dive in a little bit, and I'm going to kind of share with you an example of how this works, because it's important to assess as you go along, as your portfolio grows and your equity level increases, how well that equity is performing for you. So let's go through an actual example with you so that I can explain the numbers and show you how the calculations work. Again, you might want to grab yourself a piece of paper and a pen, or another way of actually capturing this information. So let's take our very first buy-to-let property that we bought. It's a good one to start with because it's gone up over the course of time. So the very first property that we bought was back in 2001, and we purchased a one-bedroom flat for £46,000. We then took a mortgage out against that property at 85% loan to value, which means the mortgage was 85% of the value of that property, meaning that we had a mortgage of £39,100. The deposit was therefore £6,900. That's our own money that we had to put into the deal. We had to do a little bit of refurbishment, and that cost us around about £1,500. And the costs to purchase the property, including legal fees, mortgage broker fees, valuation fee, etc., was about £1,600. It makes a nice round figure that we put in of about £10,000 in total, if you add those three figures up. So our total costs in were £10,000. Now, the cash flow that we were achieving at the time was £250 a month. If you multiply 250 by 12, you get £3,000. And then the next equation that you work out in terms of the true rate of return, which we've discussed before, was £3,000 divided by £10,000, which was the money that we put into the deal. And then you multiply that by 100 and you get 30%. So that's expressed as a percentage. So we were getting 30% true rate of return on investment from that £10,000 that we put in that property, which is pretty amazing. I'm sure you will agree. No wonder we wanted to continue building our property portfolio at the time. So after a period of time, we decided to refinance that property and we took some money out. So we pulled out around about £33,500 to reinvest into more properties. So that's kind of been working for us even harder over the course of time. So currently on that property, we have a mortgage of £72,500. And the value of that flat is now £150,000, right? And therefore the current level of equity is £77,500 because we've refinanced it and pulled extra money out. Our current cash flow on that property is £450 a month. So therefore, the current return on equity is worked out like this. £450 multiplied by 12 equals £5,400. That's the annual cash flow. We divide that by the current level of equity, which is £77,500, which equals 0.0696. And then we multiply that by 100 to get the percentage, which means that we're getting a return on equity at the moment of 6.96%. So basically 7% return on equity because it's risen so much in value. And because we have basically quite a decent amount of equity still in there, we haven't refinanced it up, to the highest degree. This means that that equity is sitting there is performing at just 7%, which is completely different to the original 30%. So this is why you have to kind of take stock of what you've got going on every now and again. So we've been deliberating about, okay, do we keep that property? Do we sell it? If we sell it, we have a huge capital gains tax bill, because the capital gains tax will be across the entire equity that we've made over the course of time. So that will slash quite a lot of money coming back to us. So, you've got to take all these kinds of things into consideration. Are we better off leaving it there? Are we better off selling it, taking the equity, putting it into an index fund, which is achieving, 13 to 15% on average every year? Or should we just keep it where it is and enjoy the cash flow and enjoy the potential future capital growth that property could bring us? Obviously, our decisions change over the course of time, and we have to keep an eye on what's going on in our portfolio to make sure that we, are working it as hard as we can. Personally, we wouldn't be taking it out and putting it into anything achieving 4% or 6% or anything less than what we've got coming in at the moment, because we'd rather put it into better performing investments. Not even reducing mortgages is on our top priority, because we want to keep that money working for us. And the more you reduce your mortgage, the more equity you have in a property, and the lower your return on equity goes. Okay, so have a think about any assets that you own with equity in. Like I say, for most people, it's your own home. However, be really careful about if you're going to consider releasing any equity from your own home, because this is obviously going to cost you more money to start with. It's going to cost you more money to have that money to come out. Therefore, if you're going to use that equity, you need to make sure that any vehicle that you're going to put it into, I don't mean buying a car, I mean investment vehicle, like a property, like some sort of stocks or shares, ISA, some sort of index fund, or whatever it's going to be, is going to perform better than the interest rate you're going to be charged to take the money out from that asset in the first place. You have to be really careful. Again, caveat, not financial advice. You must speak to the experts and make sure that you are doing what's right for you if you do consider working with any equity that you have, particularly in your own home. So, of course, make sure that you are making very conscientious decisions and speaking to people who can help you to come to the right conclusion, especially if you are considering releasing equity out of your own home. So it's all about the risk-reward ratio, which again, we've spoken about before in terms of how hard you want your equity to work for you. The question really is, what level of return would you like or want to see from your equity if you were to work with it differently? Look closely at how well your equity is performing for you right now, because it's going to be very, very important, especially, again, like I've spoken about, the debasement of currency, rate of inflation. You need to make sure that you're getting at least how much your value of your money is going down each year. You need to get that back up to make sure that it's at the same level and performing better, ideally, than just leaving it where it is right now. So questions to ask yourself are you happy to leave it where it is to perhaps accumulate in the long term? Would you like to receive more cash flow perhaps in the short or medium term, for example? The choice is yours, quite literally. So do you see now why I'm so keen to help you understand how we work, how we think about things, to really consider your position and how well your assets and your equity and your cash is working for you? Because quite frankly, if you don't keep on top of these things, you're going to be left behind. So hope that helps to inspire you, the last 4 episodes that I've done in relation to these number crunching exercises. And happy number crunching yourself. Let me know how you get on with working out your own return on equity or return on investment or true rate of return, whatever else we've spoken about in the last few weeks. I hope it's really helped you. And of course, you know where I am if you'd like more help. Take care till the next time. Bye.